morning. Good morning, Senator. I'm back.
Good morning.
Thank you for holding down the show last week while I was gone. Had a little bit of a cold last intro to the spring cold, so feeling a little bit better now. But we've certainly had a lot in the news. Not really good news. Very uncertain news. So we want to talk about stuff that's going on with the U.S., Israel, and the war with Iran. But I know we want to touch base on what's going on in Palestine, particularly in the West Bank. So I want to pass it down to you. And you were referencing an article this morning that was in the New York Times a few days ago. So I just want to pass it to you, and you can kind of start us off with the briefing on that.
Okay, thank you, Morgan. Yes, the New York Times had a superb article. You could tell that they had worked very hard on it. They had done personal interviews of many people, examined police records, queried the Israeli police. Now, these people, the victims of Jewish settler sexual and violence and thievery and abuse. We're talking about Palestinians on the West Bank. Now, the West Bank has not been involved in the conflict in Gaza. That's a totally different group, totally different governance structure, and officially, Israel treats these West Bank Palestinians as stateless people. Now, there are Palestinians who are Israeli citizens, and these are the ones when the European Jews came across the Mediterranean right after the Second World War, they settled Palestine. Palestine had a significant Muslim population, large Muslim population, but it also had a significant element of Jews who were traditional Jews from all the way back to biblical times. And they also had a very large population of Christians who had been there. They were originally Jews and then converted to Christianity under the faith in Jesus Christ. So you actually had coins, Palestinian coins back in those days that showed three interlocking rings, which represented the three dominant faiths within the Palestinian. So you had a ring for the Muslims, a ring for the Christians, a ring for the Jews. They were all important and significant population. When the Jewish population decided to immigrate from Europe, these were people who may never have had any connection with Israel at all, historical Israel. But they came in and they began taking over through terror and driving the Palestinian people out. And they drove out both Muslims and Christians. Wasn't just Muslims. Sometimes people find it very convenient to say, well, we hate Muslims and we're going to, do this and that. But they drove many Christians out of the Palestinian area. Well, in any event, so although they were able to drive most of the Palestinians out of what then became Israel in 1948. Israel started in 1948. It doesn't have a long history. And but anyway, they drove most of them out, but there was still a small remnant that remained in this area. And those eventually became Israeli citizens. They can actually vote and be elected. But the West Bank was taken over by war. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, the Israeli army took it over, and rather than try to incorporate those people, they simply uh, made them stateless people. They said, okay, there is no Palestine,
Mhm.
so it
Yeah.
doesn't exist. It's governed by us. And so it's been very easy because, under the Nazis referred to the Untermenschen, the
Mhm.
subhumans. And clearly the people there view the people on the West Bank, just as in Gaza, as subhumans. And so there's this subtler population that has occupied as much of the West Bank as it could. Now it started off there weren't any Jews of significance within the West Bank, uh, and so it was all owned by the Palestinian people, but gradually the Jewish settlers, it's very tempting to, rather than go out and spend a lifetime earning your own money, to go and just steal from someone else. And this has been going on for for a generation, for a couple of generations. And
Yeah. I believe it was the 1967 partition plan that divides the West Bank territory as well as acknowledges the Gaza territory under the Palestinian Authority, but they split up in three different sections: A, B, or C. And I believe it's Israeli controlled with Palestinian Authority, and then Palestinian Authority controlled. Now, if they're Israeli controlled, what Israel will do is they'll proclaim that to be military land. So we see that happening a lot of the southern parts of the West Bank. I believe Massafir Yatta is one of the locations that happens, where these people who had generational homes, they're shepherds, they're gardeners, they work on their olive groves. The Israeli government will say this is military land, so you have no right to be here, and therefore they will demolish the home. And that's where you see, I think in this image, I'll show the tent. You have a lot of that in Palestine as well, where, people say, oh, these people live in squalor. It's because the Israeli government will go in there and destroy their home that has been there for generations, and they won't give them the right to rebuild. But to show a sign of steadfastness, they will stay on the land and utilize what they have accessible to them to kind of create some kind of makeshift home. So that's kind of what you see often in these Palestinian areas, where the Israeli government is trying to push the Palestinians into the Palestinian Authority areas to create basically ghettos.
Yes. Well, in any event, we've got this story out of the New York Times. This was on March the 18th, and it's entitled "Palestinian Man Recounts Brutal Sexual Assault by Israeli Settlers." And this was there was a mob of Jewish settlers that attacked his property. Now these are peaceful people. They have no arms. They're not rising up against anyone. They're just trying to eke out a living in their poor way. And but the settlers want their property, want their money, and so what they did, they burst into his home, which is a very, very modest little place where they live, and this was the head of the household, a 29-year-old shepherd, and they stripped him naked in front of his children, his parents, his uncle, and there was a group of them that lived all in the one place, because it's very hard for Palestinians. They're not allowed to have any additional lands or anything. And so they stripped him naked, they beat him, they zip tied his penis. They took the naked man in front of his children. They zip tied his penis. And a very dangerous thing. You know, if you can't urinate, you can't live. You die. And besides, it causes a great deal of damage to do that. And they tied his arms. They tied his legs. And he said later, he said he thought he was going to die, and anyway, there were several family members interviewed by the New York Times. There's an American woman who was there, and there also were police complaints filed with the Israeli police. Now, the poor Palestinians have no control over the Israeli police. They can file complaints with them, but almost uniformly, even though there may be some investigation done and so forth, the cases are almost invariably dropped. And no matter how egregious, whether it's murder or what it is, the Israelis just look away and say, no, that's just an old thing that from months ago, and we looked into it and there's nothing to worry about. So anyway, 20 of the settlers marauded through the Bedouin encampment, and they went in, they kicked, they slapped all of the children, all of the adults, the elderly people, they beat them. And the New York Times reports that the Israeli settlers have been waging an escalating campaign of violence and land theft against the Palestinians across much of the West Bank. And they reported that settlers have murdered, they say killed, obviously it's murder.
Yeah.
They murdered 7 West Bank Palestinians so far, just this year. Just at the beginning of the year already, and this is pretty much like in 7 different incidents. Mm-hmm. I can't swear that there weren't, some of those where they murdered a couple of people at once, but they seem to kind of delight. There was another case just very recently where I think this was a Christian Palestinian family, and the children were out playing in their little area, and the mother was there, and she went to bring the children in, and an Israeli sniper just shot her in the back just for fun. Just, as a Palestinian, it's the untermenschen. Why not kill her? And always the Israelis, they do a report and so forth, but the police have little interest in pursuing these things, and even to the extent that they do, the Israeli government always is there to say, let's look the other way. But it's Mr. Abdul Kabash, the shepherd, said that the assault kept a night of terror for him, his wife, their 3 daughters, his brother, Muhammad's wife, their 7 children, his father and his uncle. All were beaten, every one of them. The daughters, the 7 children of his brother and his brother's wife, his father, his uncle, all were beaten. Except for a sleeping 4-month-old baby. And it's very possible, knowing the mentality of these settlers, that they just hadn't discovered the baby, or they might have beaten the baby too. Mm-hmm. But before they left, the Jewish settlers stole all of the family's 400 sheep. The entire means of earning a livelihood. And 400 sheep has a lot of value for poor people that have to live off the land. It's all gone. They stole the wedding rings of the adults and stole everything. Their cell phones. They had some cash. Their identification papers. Left them simply with nothing. And this is just one of many instances. Now, it happens to have been extremely well reported in the New York Times. So instead of just sort of vague assertion, well, this happened, this one was murdered, and so forth, it's done in some detail. But it's important to know that this happens all the time. It's amazing to me that you still have people, going on and on about the Holocaust, and they talked about Kristallnacht under the Nazis, where there was a great deal of destruction of Jewish property in Germany, and this type of thing. It may have been on a different magnitude because it was much larger, more populous country. It was very much the same type of thing. It's sort of this mentality that you have people who are subhumans. They have no right to anything, and you go in and you hurt them, you intimidate them, and then you steal everything. I don't know whether at Kristallnacht, whether they stole, but in this case, the Jewish settlers just stole everything. And it wasn't just, we want to hurt Palestinians. It's, we want what they own. We want to take what they own. It's thievery. It's just plain thievery. It's criminal behavior in many respects, under international law, but just under common law. If you did this anywhere other than in Israel, you could very easily be faced with life imprisonment. But in Israel, it's just no deal.
Yeah, I think it's important to note as well. There's a few things that I wanted to note. In the beginning, you spoke about this coexistence of religion, within this holy land that subscribes to numerous three different, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Right now, well, it's actually lapsing at the end of it, but it was the first time in decades that the emergence of Ramadan met with the Christian Lent. And you have in the Holy Land, you have these sites that people go to and they worship, and you have the Israeli government that's forbidding Islam and Christians to engage in those kinds of worships. Their churches are closed. The Al-Aqsa Mosque has been closed. And you have these people going as far as they can to the threshold of these establishments before the Israeli military will throw pepper spray or disperse the crowds, which is another representation of the oppression that's going on there that, the American people should be against, as we stand for religious freedom and governments that don't stop that from their people engaging in those actions. Another thing that I wanted to mention is, what Israel's doing in Lebanon. They have now displaced 1 million people in Lebanon. They're doing the same thing that they did in Gaza. You just had a Harvard professor who was one of the surgeons that worked on some of the people that were in the Boston bombers. They were some of the casualties, the victims of that event. He had, worked on them. His apartment was just leveled by Israel for no good reason. He posted a video of it too. You have over 1 million people that are displaced out of Beirut right now, with no no timeline of when they can go back to their homes. It's essentially the same thing as what they're doing in Gaza, and they're doing it carte blanche with American taxpayer dollars, and under the guise of what we want to talk about right now is the Iran war. There are not eyes on what Israel's doing because there's a larger focus on what the American government and Israel is doing in Iran. So I know that we want to touch base on that as well, but I wanted to kind of bring those two things into the realm, because I think that that's very significant. And it's said that the emergence of Ramadan and Christian Lent won't take place until 2050 again, where they coincide with each other like that.
I see. The attack on Lebanon is not by any means the first time that Israel has attacked Lebanon to seize their lands. And they've driven enormous numbers of Christians out of Lebanon. They've repeatedly had large incursions of the Israeli army attacking across the border. The only reason there is a Palestinian, a Hezbollah militia on the border with Israel is not because they want to be prepared to attack Israel. They've never attacked into Israel. They are there to defend Lebanon against the unending attacks into Lebanon by the Israeli army. And a huge displacement of civilians. They use this as a technique to just wear down the people. They will tell them, okay, get out of this area, get out of that area. This is what they did in Gaza. Get out of here, and then they want to chase them from place to place. They tell them, okay, you've got to go to this place, then you'll be safe. And people run there, and then they say, okay, get out of there. And then the people are forced to get up and run again. And it's just a way of gradually exterminating the population. So they're trying to do this in Lebanon, but surprisingly, Hezbollah, which had been decapitated in large part by this, by planting secret bombs in their cell phones, and then Israel was able to just set them off and just murder lots of people in Lebanon. And they thought that Hezbollah was gone, but just last night or day before, there was a convoy of Israeli tanks moving into Lebanon that was suddenly hit by Hezbollah ambush, and apparently it knocked out all 5 of the tanks and left several of them burning in flames. And the Israeli infantry that accompanied the armor then turned around and retreated. Now that's just one battle in a major war, but I think Israel has taken advantage of the war in Iran to try to exterminate people in Lebanon and try to purge them from their lands so that Israel can move and expand its borders and move its settlers into the property owned by the Lebanese people. So it's and you mentioned the targeting of this one doctor. This is a very well documented war crime of enormous significance. This idea that the Israelis systematically eliminate all medical treatment facilities. I think just recently in Lebanon there were a considerable number of doctors and medics and so forth killed in an Israeli attack on their facility. And
I'm not sure if you witnessed it. The RT journalist the other day that was covering some of the engagements in Beirut. He was covering southern Beirut, how Israel is striking infrastructure such as bridges to cut off the south from the north of Lebanon, and he was struck on air. I don't know if you had witnessed that.
I didn't see that one.
Here, I'll pull up the video. He was actually hit with shrapnel. So it was an RT journalist. Let me see, I can have the video right here. It's just a few seconds. Go ahead and put it on the screen.
Including the Al-Marj outpost opposite Merkaba, and carried out drone strikes on the Al-Raheb site near Aitar al-Shab. Further rocket attacks were reported against Nahariya and a
on air, blatant, and they even, after the man, thankfully, thank God he survived. He had shrapnel in his arm, but he said that it seemed very deliberate. We had seen the jets flying overhead. We were wearing press gear, and they just didn't like what we were covering, which is essentially an attack on civilian infrastructure to basically trap civilians.
It's been a policy of the Israeli military to assassinate journalists, because they do not want what they're doing exposed to the light of day. And so they very, very deliberately and systematically murdered journalists. They don't care whether they're American, whether they're Russian, whether they're German, it doesn't matter. You stand in the way of Israel and you expose their war crimes to the light of day, and they're coming to kill you. That's just the way that they do.
Shocking footage.
Yeah, it's a long history. For decades now, they've had this policy where their snipers will kneecap teens and children. So if you have Palestinians who are out protesting or something, protesting the taking of their property or whatever, their snipers will very deliberately cripple the children by shooting at their knees, not so that they wound rather than kill, but so that they can disable them for life, so that they become not only are they very limited in what they can do for the rest of their lives, but it drags down their families and the community to always be pulling along these people who have been deliberately crippled by the Israeli gunfire. So it is a mess. Maybe we'll shift a little bit to the Iran war and see where we stand there.
Yes, I mean, there's a lot in the news. I know that there's these rumblings about ground invasions. I think you have the Marine Expeditionary Unit 11th, the 11th and the 31st that is being deployed to the region. And the American government has now said that there is over 50,000 active duty soldiers that are in the area. They're not necessarily given the operations to engage in Iran, but they're just saying that's kind of what is prepared there. You also have what's rumbling is the 82nd Airborne Division. There was an exercise that was canceled, and people are speculating that is because they're on kind of a notice to be deployed at drop of a hat, if that is what is needed of them. So that was very interesting. That was in the news as well. You have kind of military strategists that are saying that a ground invasion probably will occur in the next few days. Do you have any expertise kind of mainly on maybe the Marine Expeditionary Units or, the 82nd Airborne, kind of what their tasks are?
Yeah, the importance of the Marines and the 82nd Airborne is that, armies are interesting. They have large numbers of people because you have to have people to provide supplies and logistics and, get oil and water and food to the front and take care of casualties. So you hear this term, the tip of the spear. The tip of the spear are those people who actually engage the enemy in very direct combat. And of those, sort of the premier with the Army. It's the 82nd Airborne, and then you have some other very high profile units. And then you have the Marine Corps. And the Marine Corps, while it has lots of people and lots of functions, it is very oriented towards infantry assault groups. And the Marines are historically the amphibious force in readiness, and they are structured to go into the attack, into the assault, across the beach, and absorb the enormous casualties that often attend amphibious assaults. So there was already this 31st Expeditionary Unit, has about 2,500 Marines, and it has a helicopter aircraft carrier that it's actually more than just helicopters, but it has the vertical lift aircraft that can then convert, and the motors then start acting like a traditional airplane. So you have those for lifting troops ashore, and then you also have a special type of F-35 fighter plane, which also, the one that's used by the Navy and the Marine Corps, can actually lift vertically and then fly off like a traditional jet. Mm-hmm. Now, when they do that, their payload is very limited because it's hard to lift heavy ordnance up vertically. And but in any event, so this whole package is designed for amphibious assaults. Mm-hmm. And you not only had the 31st, which is right now in the war zone, but you have I think it's the 11th, that is on the way. It's a similar package. So that gets us up to about 5,000 Marines. Still, I'm not sure. That seems light to me for the type of engagement that they're about to undertake, where it seems the idea is to seize Karg Island, which is the sort of the heart of Iranian oil exporting. Mm-hmm. It's a small island, and I suspect that the Marines could seize that successfully. If they're trying to then go on and seize the bank of the Strait of Hormuz that is owned by Iran, that could be a really mighty undertaking. I'm not sure that we're well structured for that.
Yeah, some of the viewers that are watching, they're bringing up some interesting points that you do have some other military experts that are bringing up that it strikes them, this engagement, as almost, sending these Marines to take Karg Island. A lot of them are speculating that if they do take it, which they think that they will, there is very little chance they'll be able to get out. So it's basically a sacrifice that they'll be making. And that you have some of these viewers who are commenting on that will then be used as a pretext to actually do a larger kind of ginning up support by the American people, because we have all these service members that will be, coming home in caskets, or if we can ever get them back, to have a larger engagement, even to the extent of dropping a nuke on Iran. That's kind of been floated. Mm-hmm. Another thing that kind of what's being talked about in the chat, which I feel like, they're saying that it's very reminiscent of our engagement in Iraq and Afghanistan, which I would actually speculate maybe it's a little more different. When we were fighting the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, all those are basically militia groups that don't have a backing of a government, whereas Iran has, they have ballistic missiles. They're getting backing from military equipment by Russia and China. They're getting intel from Russia and China. These are very, very wildly different conflict battlegrounds that we were going into at this point. A little more advanced. We just had the other day an F-35 be shot down and had an emergency landing, I believe in Iraq, a military base, but it was shot in Iranian airspace after a combat mission that it was sent on. These are things that we, the American people, said is kind of the F-35s are invincible. They're, can't be seen. They're super fast. And, we were told by the American, leadership that all of the anti-aircraft capabilities by the Iranians has been knocked out, which clearly that's not the case. We just had an F-35 taken down. So I think that is very important aspects to bring the conversation is how different, an engagement in Iran is going to be, as well as, deploying this minimal amount of Marines, like you said. You said it seems rather conservative, rather than kind of an aggressive push for a ground invasion. Is there maybe a methodology behind that to garner support from the American people for further engagement, if not to do something catastrophic like drop a nuke?
This has always been Israel's goal. Now, of course, the United States gains nothing from any of these Mideast wars. Absolutely. The American people get zero for all of the enormous debt we've incurred, for the thousands of Americans who have died, great, wonderful, patriotic young men and women. None of this is done for the United States. The war on terror was never done for the United States, because we never attacked the terrorist countries like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, places like that. We attacked those that were the most anti-terrorist places, like Libya, Syria, Iraq. And so the American people have never stood to gain a single thing. But Israel has been sort of the chess master, moving the pieces around on the board. Mm-hmm. Their great goal was to get American troops on the ground embroiled in an endless war in Iran.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, they've gone about systematically murdering the top leadership of Iran. Mm-hmm. And recently, President Trump made the comment, something to the effect that you hardly even know who to negotiate with, because you don't really know who's in power anymore. I don't think that's entirely an accident. Iran or Israel does not want this war to be settled. They want it to continue, and for them, the greatest achievement of the war against Iran will be if American soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines are physically engaged in combat, and they're drawn into an endless war that will just go on and on to where it weakens Iran, but it causes chaos throughout the Middle East, and that gives Israel greater strength.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's this video I want to play. There's this lot of speculation on what's been going on with Benjamin Netanyahu. He's been very on the sidelines where, by all accounts, he's kind of this, for lack of better terms, a narcissistic character that likes to be in the front frame of taking, the credit for these
attacks
or calling the shots. He's been very, very conservative the past, 8 or so days, wouldn't you say? Like, he's been, not in the war room with the Israelis. But 2 days ago, he did a 30-minute press conference, and I have a little snippet of it. And it basically kind of alludes to there won't be a necessary change that he seeks in Iran without a ground invasion. Maybe we can talk a bit about this afterwards, but, what they're engaging in Lebanon, we'd even spoken about that when they engaged with Hezbollah and they had to retreat back in the past. They tried to do a ground insurgence just the other day, and they lost around 27 Merkava tanks. So if they are fixing it to be themselves, they are not in the right position. So that leaves no other kind of player but the American government to take up the mantle of that. So I want to go ahead and play this little clip.
It is often said that you can't win You can't do revolutions from the air. That is true. You can't do it only from the air. You can do a lot of things from the air, and we're doing, but there has to be a ground component as well. There are many possibilities for this ground component, and I take the liberty of not sharing with you all those possibilities.
So is there playing a little, wordplay, not really, saying there will be, but there won't be, kind of talking both sides of their mouth. But what it seems like they're getting at is that they're probably behind the scenes lobbying the American government to do this. We just had the second in command to Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, basically resigned, saying that Iran served no immediate threat to the American government and that Israel and its lobby were the main components of pushing this. So that would kind of serve to that that theory.
And the Israelis are not very good at taking casualties. Their way of war, which I guess maybe in a way it makes sense, is you get the most advanced weapons from the United States. You fly off, you drop bombs and so forth from altitudes and in ways that where the other side cannot fight back, and you just kill people, and you destroy all of their shelters to where there's no place for them to get in out of the sandstorms and the cold and the blistering heat, and they just gradually die. This is what they're doing in Gaza, and but when it comes to actual ground combat, they are traditionally very sensitive to incurring any casualties. They can kill and slaughter people all over as long as it doesn't affect them. They're not going to be fighting in close combat in Iran. They're wanting Americans. The Americans. We're part of the Untermenschen, the subhumans, as far as they're concerned.
It appears so, yeah.
Americans. They don't care how many Americans die as long as it draws us in. And the problem is that, once America has sent its sons and daughters off to war, if things go wrong, well, you kind of have to double down because, your sons, your daughters died doing this, and so now you send more. Right now, President Trump he's in a political military dilemma because Netanyahu convinced him that, boy, all we've got to do is wave the flag a little bit and the people of Iran are going to overthrow their government. Well, they didn't. And in fact, now Iran has never been more united than it is today. Right now, as far as they're concerned, everybody, the pro-government, the anti-government, they see their country being attacked by foreigners. And so it's just a total narcissistic illusion by people in the Pentagon, people in Tel Aviv, that somehow people are going to say, oh, hallelujah, we have foreigners dropping bombs and killing us. We're going to rally to their cause. That's not going to happen. That's just the most stupid, arrogant thing I can possibly imagine people imagining. That's just not the way human nature is.
Yeah, I want to pivot a little bit too. What's really going on is this major. I think we're probably want to wrap up with this last little segment on it, but Iran has really shown their power in cutting off the Strait of Hormuz. And it was something that intelligence agencies have been kind of playing tepidly, but we all knew that this was the grand power that Iran had. This is why you had previous presidents not engage in those this conflict, even though you have high cushioning from the Israeli army. You had the Japanese, they attended the White House the other day. Japan gets 90% of their oil for their country from the Strait of Hormuz. Only 10% comes from elsewhere. And you had a reporter ask Trump a question, and it was kind of this really big fumble of the president. He spoke about, he said, why didn't you, I won't play the video. Why didn't you alert the Japanese? Something about, you didn't alert us about Pearl Harbor. What has happened since is that you had the Iranian government saying, we'll allow Japanese ships, because the Japan was going there essentially, or Trump had Japan there to see if they would aid in kind of quelling down the tensions and ushering ships out of the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran has kind of done a one-up and said, we'll allow the transition of Japan's ships. So, what I want to pose to you is kind of where this leaves the American diplomacy, how we are able to use, our strengths to kind of maybe bend these countries to our will. I know that that's a very harsh way to put it, but you have the Iran government right now that is allowing ships that are leaving the Hormuz, they have to show that they purchased that oil in yuan, Chinese currency.
Yes.
So it's shifting away from the hegemony of the U.S. dollar and doing it very, very fast. And I think that kind of goes with the face of, Americans' interest. We've dedicated the show to really talk about how this war is completely in American interest. But I think that on its face is another element that this engagement is going to have lasting reparation and terrible effects on the Americans that will long proceed, after having the Strait of Hormuz kind of secured and ships going in and out of it again, is that you have this another stance where other countries are not going to want to engage in the U.S. The currency.
Yeah, the idea has been that the United States will protect all of the Arab countries, the interests of those in Asia and Europe, and it has failed very dramatically. Europe is devastated by the increase in petroleum prices and so forth. No area is more damaged than Asia. And you mentioned Japan. Japan has to import everything. They're a small island nation with a large population, and they are really at the mercy of what goes on in the Strait of Hormuz. Same thing with South Korea. South Korea is in a panic over what's going on, and what's happened. We've gotten in this idea that, well, we'll go out and we'll bomb some country, and we'll bomb until we're ready to quit, and then we'll tell them, okay, we're gonna take our boot off your neck, we're gonna let you go, and that has worked in a lot of ways, but this time it didn't work. When the Israelis attacked the gas fields that are inside Iran, Iran said, okay, you want to play that game? You want to attack our gas fields? We're going to attack your gas fields. And they attacked the gas fields in Qatar, and they knocked out about 17%. And this is like the biggest gas field in the whole world. And it looks like that 17% is going to take 3 to 5 years to bring it back. So that means there's going to be an elevated price for natural gas going out for 3 to 5 years. As soon as that happened, then President Trump said, oh, well, I've gotten after the Israelis. They're not going to do that again. And the message was, please don't attack our gas facilities. And it's just crazy, because now it's showing that Iran has the power to punch back. And We better come to grips with this, because even though we've murdered off the top people, fact is that they have enormous quantities of missiles and drones. They're not running out. They will not run out. We've destroyed a lot of the infrastructure, but a lot of it is underground, and they're able to shift it around and dig out here and there. So we need to recognize that this is an enduring military force, and we can murder, 100, 500, 1,000 top leaders. But at this point, the Iranians are so angry and so united that there's going to be layer after layer after layer. And now they seem to, the government seems to be in far better command and control of its people than it was 6 months ago.
No, certainly. Yeah, I think I think that the American government, a lot of it in the media, if you say this, then that means like the president doesn't have agency. I think the president is being misled heavily on Iran's capabilities. And I think, we have to make a mention is that Iran, this kind of saber rattling by the Israeli government to the American government has been happening for decades, and the Iran government has been listening. They haven't been playing kind of on the sidelines thinking that it won't happen. I think they've been preparing for this. I think that was one of the segments where they asked him, are you ready for a ground invasion? If America does a ground invasion, we're waiting for him. I think that was very true. One of the Iranian officials had said that. And I think that is kind of what's coming to fruition right now, is they have been preparing for this. And I don't think the American government has given the Iranians enough credit for how smart they are in kind of playing the long game. And I think a lot of military strategists are correct in saying this, that the ball is officially in Iran's court at this point.
Well, we can just hope and pray that President Trump will get rid of the Witkoff and the Kushner, all the billionaire investors, and get some diplomats and give them instructions. Okay, we're going to end this war and try to do it in a way that will save face for us, perhaps save face for the Iranians, and diffuse this thing, because otherwise we're going to have a historic wipeout in the midterm elections. And I'm a Republican who's fought for the party for practically a lifetime. And I just see everything about to be swept away if we don't get this thing settled. And if we end up having a big bloodbath with the Marines in the Straits of Hormuz, it is all over. So we need to have a diplomatic settlement where President Trump can say, "Look at this! I've brought about peace and harmony." And anyway, we just need to figure out something to pull back from the.
Yeah, we certainly need to have an influx of sounder minds kind of taking over the stage. And I know that we've run a little over the time of this show, but it's always a pleasure talking to you, Senator. And your expertise is definitely needed in these times. I know that we will kind of hint to it next week. We might have a congressional candidate who is one of those sounder minds that we speak of. He's pushing kind of this against these engagements. He has this very productive way of speaking about it by pushing development over, tension. So maybe we'll have him on the next show and we'll speak to him. Maybe that'll be a reoccurring thing that we kind of try and bring some sounder minds on the show and show the American people that there are sanity that needs to be highlighted, as opposed to kind of these insane people that we have at the microphone right now. But I just want to encourage everybody to tune in next week to focus on the news. Thank you, Senator, for everything you do.
Thank you, Morgan. I appreciate all that you do.
Likewise. All right. Take care, everybody.